Welcome to episode 3 of the Rugby History Project, the legacy of Leonas, the addition, success, and removal of Spain in the Women's Six Nations. Before I get into today's episode, I just want to apologise for any mispronunciations or any issues. I very much only speak English, but I hope you enjoy it. Spain took part in the Women's Six Nations between 2000 and 2006 before being removed by administrators of the men's game, a decision still viewed by many within the women's rugby community. 2006 Women's Six Nations started off strong, with England taking on Wales in St Albans, Scotland facing France in Edinburgh, and Ireland taking on Spain in Dublin. While Spain's inclusion in the 2006 Six Nations may come as a surprise to those newer to the women's game, their exclusion from the competition at the conclusion of the 2006 season has long been a contentious issue within women's rugby circles. Following on from two successful World Cups held in Wales and Scotland respectively, the women's unions in England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales aim to organise more frequent test matches between the four home nations. The nations' competition had an easily identifiable brand within the UK and Ireland, giving the women's teams a potential boost in marketing as a result. The women's home nations kicked off in 1996 with no input from the men's nations organisers. England dominated the competition, but Scotland managed to take home the crown in 1998. France officially joined in 1999 to create the Five Nations, having taken part in the competition unofficially in 1998. The year 2000 saw significant changes in both the men's and women's competitions. Whilst it was confirmed for Italy to join the men's tournament to create the Six Nations, on the women's side, the Irish Women's Rugby Football Union withdrew after winning 3 wooden spoons back to back to back. As the Women's Five Nations was independent from the men's competition, organisers were able to bring in one of the best teams in Europe, Spain. The early days of women's rugby in Spain were poorly documented, even by women's rugby standards. What we do know is that the women's rugby took root in Spain during the 1970s, with hubs in Madrid and Barcelona, primarily at universities. Leonas played their first international match in 1989, a 28-0 loss to France, and a prolific Catalonia representative team had beaten a Welsh 15s 4-0 in 1990, followed by a tour of Wales in 1992. Spain were invited to the first ever World Cup in 1991 and managed to come sixth despite having only played one official test match beforehand. They were unable to defend their placement 3 years later as the team lacked significant funding to attend the competition and had to withdraw at the last minute. Despite missing the 1994 World Cup, Leonas had a reputation as one of Europe's best sides. Between 1995 and 1991, the team had won the FIRA Women's European Championship once and had been the runners-up twice. Between the FIRA Championships and the high proportion of European countries at the World Cup in 1991 and 1998, Spain had faced off against their European neighbours frequently, and before entering the Five Nations tournament had beaten all of the home nations and France at least once. Whilst newly promoted teams often struggle adapting in their new competition, Spain managed wins over Scotland and Wales, leading them to a third-place finish in 2000. Interestingly, both of Spain's wins that year were home games. In 2001, Leonas came joint second with a 6-0 win over France at home and a 5-0 win over Wales away. 2002 saw significant events in women's rugby. First, Ireland rejoined the nations competition, creating the first ever Women's Six Nations, and secondly, Spain hosted the 2002 Women's Rugby World Cup in Barcelona. Then captain Mercedes Batador was realistic about the host's chances in the competition, following on from a disappointing Six Nations campaign where the team had been nilled by France and beaten by both England and Scotland again. The World Cup is a pinnacle of a player's career and I'm sure Spain will do well in front of its own public. I think finishing between 5th and 7th in the world would be a good result for us, but it will be tough work because the other teams have made great progress and we will go match by match. Mercedes Batador, 2002 Spain captain. Ultimately, Leonas finished 8th after defeats to England in the pool stage, Scotland and the USA in rankings finals. On a positive note, however, Spain recorded a 62-0 win over Japan at the tournament, then the record win for the team. The tournament was not a great experience for players, as teams were scattered in hotels across Barcelona, but it was relatively successful with fans, as 8,000 people turned up to watch a predictable final of New Zealand versus England. The following World Cup cycle would be a mixed bag for Spain, culminating in their removal from the Six Nations through no fault of their own. After being whitewashed in the 2003 Six Nations, Leonas bounced back by winning the 2003 FIRA Women's European Championship, beating France 16-10 in the final. Their form continued into 2004, losing only to France and England in the Six Nations. Going into the 2006 Six Nations, Spain would have aimed to beat Scotland to be considered the best of the rest, after falling to them in 2005. However, before the competition, it became known to the unions that the discussions were underway to incorporate the Women's Six Nations within the Men's Six Nations organisation. For this, the competition had been run independently by the unions themselves. The sticking point, however, was that the men's competition included the home nations, France and Italy. It became clear that moving forward with the plan would mean that Spain would be replaced by Italy in the women's competition despite their historically strong record. It's not known whether Leonas purposely sabotaged their matches during the 2006 Six Nations, or if their morale was affected by their upcoming expulsion from the competition, but Spain did put up a poor performance. Whitewashed for the second time, the team did actually score more points and conceded fewer points than they did during the 2003 Six Nations. However, their poor performance was definitely at odds with their recent form, and the competition was not good preparation for the 2006 Women's Rugby World Cup either, where they finished 9th. The removal of Spain was extremely controversial and is still something which is discussed with ire by many within the women's rugby community. Whilst the centralisation of the Six Nations has allowed for additional funding for the competition, as well as improved streaming capability, the decision to remove Spain was not in the best interest of the women's game. Scrum Queens founder Ali Donnelly wrote that when merging women's unions with their male counterparts, the women's game would cease to be run by those who understood it inside out, a statement which feels accurate when describing the 2007 takeover. In the 19 years since their expulsion from the Six Nations, Leonas have produced a series of inconsistent results, with an irregular pattern of development. In the immediate years following the 2006 World Cup, Spain suffered from a lack of game time. Those within the Six Nations still often entered the FIRA Women's European Championship, and they often dominated due to their higher level of game and training time in comparison to non-Six Nations teams. They also suffered financially, as in 2014 the federation went through a bankruptcy. This resulted in Spain withdrawing from the newly reformatted and rebranded Rugby Women's Championship in 2015. 2016 saw a significant change in the Leonas camp. Not only did it start their 8-year reign as Rugby Europe champions, but it also saw them take on a wider range of competition, taking wins over former Six Nations rivals Wales, Scotland and Ireland, and a record unbeaten season in 2018-2019. In the post-COVID era, Spain have struggled against top sides, with their only win against a top side being an 8-7 win over Ireland in the 2021 World Cup qualifiers. The addition of WXV to the rugby calendar has benefited Spain immeasurably. After a 15-13 loss to Ireland in the 2023 edition of WXV3 led to a second-place finish, Spain went on to lift the WXV3 trophy in the following year, conceding only 8 points in the process, and qualifying for the 2025 Rugby World Cup. Leading into the 2025 World Cup, 32 Leonas players have been given 6-month grants to cover their living expenses and to allow the players to concentrate entirely on rugby in preparation for their return to the competition. We are happy with the decision, and it is a step forward towards a more promising future for all of us. There is still a long way ahead of us to get that fully professional level, and I hope we can get there. It will be important to not lose focus, especially after the Women's World Cup. Delgado is one of the handful of Spanish players who ply their trade outside of Spain, with those players split equally across the France Elite 1 and English PWR. Delgado herself has become somewhat of a cult figure with PWR fans, having played for DMP Sharks, Exeter Chiefs, Gloucester Hartpury and most recently Harlequins. Whilst Delgado is expected to retire from international rugby following the World Cup, she has recently renewed her contract with Harlequins, where she plays alongside Spanish teammate and up-and-coming superstar Claudia Pena. It is clear that the expulsion of Spain from the Women's Six Nations harmed the programme, but it is also unlikely that the team will be readmitted unless there are additional teams added to the men's competition. With an expanded 15s calendars, thanks to tournaments such as WXV, and increasingly more competitive Rugby Europe and increasing professionalisation within Spain, Leonas have a path to the top of the world stage, despite not sitting at Europe's top table. I hope you've enjoyed the 3rd edition of the Rugby History Project. If you would like to see references, notations, photos, etc., please check out the page that goes along with this article, and I will see you all soon. Bye!